Is this on? It is. Ho ho. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our, what is this, fifth annual? I think fifth. Wow. Autism Resource Fair. We are so grateful to the Museum of Discovery for hosting us and for allowing us to partake in all of their fun, because this is such a fun place to be. I am out of breath because I've been going up and down the stairs, but I'm going to introduce three wonderful people. So I'm going to get some air in me so I can do that. We have three very, very cool people here today who I've had the privilege of getting to know since I moved here 5 years ago. And they are all writers, they are all excellent speakers, they are all neurodiverse, and have a lot to share with us that is very meaningful and inspiring and interesting and insightful. So you're in for a treat. We have first Daisy Montgomery, who is an author and speaker and comedian. We have Riley Odell, who is an author and an unofficial comedian. And we have Emily Roberts, who just makes me laugh and is also quite eloquent. So I'm just going to let them start and talk to you because they have so much more to share. So, Daisy, welcome.
Thank you for that small clap. Appreciate it. I've peaked. I can now retire. Mrs. Owens was a Skeksis, okay? An honest to God Skeksis. My fifth grade math teacher was impossibly old to me. As a 9-year-old who had not only seen Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal, but who had also read every R.L. Stine book in the elementary school library up until that point. I knew what a monster was. On this fine day of childhood hell, I found myself in the classroom, staring blankly at a math test that I had not done well on the day before. The sounds of my classmates who were outside enjoying recess were faint, but not completely muffled by the concrete block walls that I found myself in. I could hear Owen's Skeksis behind me, shuffling closer, and I swear she was ready to suck the life energy out of me as she just inched closer and closer. Well, Daisy, I suspect that you've figured out these questions that you've missed on your math test by now, she hissed. I did not look up from my math paper. Mrs. Owens, I don't understand the questions. The pencil felt slick in my hand. Despite grasping it so tightly, I was sure my fingers would break at the knuckles. She sighed a long, raspy sigh and decided to sit at the table next to me, her long fingers wrapped around a yardstick. I managed to look at her in brief spurts, but each glance seemed more painful than the last. A wicked, clenching smile began to appear between her thin, dry lips, and I swear I could hear her skin cracking, and I half expected dust to shoot out from between the cracks and into my eyes. These questions are easy, Daisy. Anyone can understand these basic math questions. Anyone who tries, anyway. I get the distinct impression that you're not actually trying, child. She nearly spat. A boulder-sized lump appeared in my throat, and I bit the inside of my left cheek in an effort not to cry. I had tried. I had studied. I had spent many a night at the kitchen table at home with my father breaking pencils and yelling at me, "Are you stupid or something? How can you not understand basic math?" And yet, no matter how long I looked at those questions, I could not understand them. I wasn't even sure where to start or why we had to torture ourselves figuring out what time a train is going to show up at the station when it's going 70 miles per hour from 100 miles away. Isn't that why we have schedules? So we can know what time to show up at the train station to get on the train? Much like other things, such as making friends, tying my shoes, going to new places, transitions, having normal hobbies. Math did not come easy to me, and I did not know why. All I knew is that something must be wrong with me, because if nothing was wrong with me, I would be able to do these tasks easily, just like everyone else. If nothing was wrong with me, maybe people would like me. As I heard my classmates lining up outside of the room in a post-recess frenzy, Mrs. Owens informed me she would be calling my parents because she felt that I needed more motivation at home in order to do well. And as the students came into the room, I found myself looking out a window, half afraid of going home, and half wondering if my pet praying mantises ever had to learn the velocity of a bug before they were allowed to eat it. Several years later, I received my autism spectrum disorder diagnosis, and it changed my life. Before my diagnosis, I was a serial people pleaser, a pessimist, terribly, terribly anxious and depressed. Daily shutdowns were my norm. I had a career, but I was playing it safe in a low-paying job because I didn't have a lot of belief in who I was or what I was capable of. Every night, for years, I would ask myself the same question in the quiet darkness. What is wrong with me? Why is everything so hard? Essentially, I was burning myself out trying to be someone that I wasn't. I was trying to be, well, neurotypical, but I wasn't neurotypical. I was, and I am, autistic. Whenever I received my diagnosis, I finally felt like I knew who I was. And more importantly, I was able to extend myself some grace and compassion in this human melodrama that we call life and the human experience. Nothing was ever wrong with me. I simply processed information differently than most people. And with that, I began a quest to not only educate people on what it feels like to be autistic every day, but to also radically accept myself within my home and outside of it. For although autistic is not the only descriptor for who I am, I simply wouldn't be me without my autism. We are the yin and the yang to each other. The ramen noodle and the shoyu broth. The sunny and the share. Though with far less skiing, I will say. Society loves to tell us to be ourselves. Only for the moment that we do, they backtrack. Love yourself, but not too much because that's conceited. Work out and get thin, but not too thin because we love curves, but don't you dare be fat. Be autistic. Unless, of course, it inconveniences people around you, in which case pretend that you are simply a piece of furniture with no thoughts, feelings, or needs for oxygen. And on and on and on. I know that I'm preaching to the choir when I talk about that society has not been kind to autistics. We've been portrayed in the media as cross-eyed oafs who obsess over a baseball, or a robotic super genius who has no concept of sarcasm or joy, or a sling blade throwing loner who apparently likes to eat lips and peckers out of an old tin can. We've been subjected to the autism warrior mom blogs and their disability inspiration porn. You know, stories that are like, hey, look, autistics are thinking, feeling human beings after all. Aww. We've been told that we can't feel empathy, that we can't live independently, or make friends, or have careers, or have genuine romantic relationships, that we can't be parents. We're treated like children whenever we have a special interest. And we've had our brains explained to us, wrongly, I might add, by neurotypical therapists. We've been told, well, you don't look autistic, which can feel like an invalidating gut punch instead of a supposed compliment. We've been murdered for being high needs children. We've been abused. We historically have been subjected to electroshock therapy, abandoned in psychiatric institutions, and experimented upon with hallucinogens. We've been emotionally kneecapped by parents who just really like being needed and therefore never teach us how to be an adult with life skills. And we've been denied vaccines because some people would rather have a sick child than an autistic one. You may be asking yourself, after all of that, how can I be openly autistic after everything you just said? How can I accept myself when no one else will accept me? Autism, appreciation, acceptance, and awareness have come a long way since the days where autistic toddlers were injected with LSD just to see what would happen. I know it's hard to believe, especially on those days where you feel like you've seen one too many autism memes. But autistics have more opportunities than ever before in history. There are psychiatrists who specialize in autistic patients, often because they are autistic themselves. Fidget toys and sensory objects are no longer taboo. And weighted blankets? They make great Christmas gifts now. There are whole clothing companies dedicated to soft, tagless clothing, not just for autistics, but for anyone with a sensory intolerance. Remote work is commonplace. Non-speaking autistics have access to communication devices and assistive technology, and we can pick up a phone and send a message to someone. There are even autism education programs like the ones in Pooter School District that are popping up all over in a growing number of states that are inclusive and life changing for families who may not be able to afford private therapies for their children. And truthfully, even if you weren't autistic, there will always be someone who doesn't like you or doesn't accept you. But the most worthwhile thing you can do is learn to accept your autistic self. Self acceptance doesn't have to have a lot of fanfare. It can be something as small as bringing earbuds with you to give you respite from an overwhelmingly loud environment. It could be telling your friend, "Thank you for that invitation to the event, but I'm exhausted and I need rest." It could be you choosing to wear comfortable clothes for you instead of trying to make yourself wear these clothes that are itchy and uncomfortable just because you believe that's what people expect of you. It could also be bringing fidget toys with you, eating those safe foods. It could be listening to that same song on repeat over and over because it feels good. And it could even be accepting that stuffed animals are a large part of your sensory diet and comfort, even if you are an adult. And if you're one of those like go big or go home people, you can say, "I'm autistic and I'm proud." Okay, please do not talk to me, look at me, perceive me for the rest of the week because that announcement took everything I had. Thank you. I'm not done yet, but thank you. Each time we make space for our authentic selves, and each time we choose ourselves instead of bending to the neurotypical will of others, we reclaim our power, our right to live with dignity and respect in a world that previously told us that we weren't worthy to exist. Each act of accommodating your autism allows you to unmask. And what could be more powerful during Autism Acceptance Month than an autistic who chooses to accept themselves? Thank you all so much for your time today. I'm Daisy Montgomery.
Uh, that was wonderful, Daisy. Thank you so much. Um, there. Now it's official. I'm going to bring up Riley Odell, who is, by the way, Daisy has a book. What is your book called?
I have a book called
She's looking at the title.
Autistic Every Day, and I am selling copies if anyone is interested when we get out of there.
Yeah, it's a fun read. And now we have another author, Riley Odell. Would you like to come up?
Uh, Hello. Yes, I'm Riley Odell. I'm a writer. I write fiction primarily in the horror, comedy, and bizarro genres, and the books I've written can be found at rileyodellwriter.com, along with some other stuff that I've created. Most recently, I created an anthology titled Divergent Realms, science fiction and fantasy stories about neurodivergence. This is the book. It's got a really beautiful cover. I'm going to be selling this downstairs as well after I'm um, after we're finished speaking in here. And uh, Basically, with this book, I solicited story submissions from neurodivergent writers and asked that neurodivergence be a prominent element in the stories themselves. The goal was basically to expand neurodiversity representation in fiction and allow neurodivergent writers the opportunity to share their perspectives with the world. So I got 14 great stories about characters that have, well, in some cases the characters are autistic, but there are other stories about characters who have ADHD, OCD, and other neurodivergences. Um, in a 5-star review, self-publishing review wrote that Divergent Realms is a mind-bending, sensorial, and wildly enjoyable read, as well as a collection of meticulously crafted, cutting-edge fiction. Um, so with that out of the way, when I was thinking about what I should talk about today, um, I thought it would make sense to look at my own life and journey with autism and see sort of what spoke to me from there. And I, like Daisy, will also be talking about self-acceptance um, and my journey with that. Hopefully, it won't be too redundant from her speech, but let's see. Um, well, so basically, we all know Temple Grandin, who's speaking here later today, and in her case, autism has been a tremendous boon for her. Her unique way of seeing the world allowed her to revolutionize an entire industry and plenty more besides. But it's not really that way for most of us. The reality is most autistic people aren't only not only aren't revolutionizing industries, but many are struggling to hold any kinds of jobs at all. A lot of autistic people receive disability benefits to help them out financially, and I've heard a lot of autistic people say that they wish they didn't have autism at all, and I've also had those kinds of thoughts myself. I think particularly when I was in college, I had a lot of that kind of thinking. I couldn't really make any friends while I was in college because I have selective mutism, which is a really kind of horrible anxiety disorder that makes it nearly impossible to talk to anyone and is often comorbid with autism. And my classes were often quite difficult to me due to that and executive function issues and other things. Um, and so for example, for years throughout grade school, I took a bunch of Spanish classes, and then I took a Spanish class in college, but um, I know basically no Spanish at all. I mean, I know that pantalones means pants because that's a really cool word, and it's funny, but um, that's nearly it. I mean, gracias, that's Spanish for could you please dump malt and cheese on my head? Or, well, no, wait, that's thank you. But anyway, I guess I know that one too. But anyway, so in that class in college, the students had to frequently talk in Spanish amongst each other, and it was a really big part of the grade. Um, and I struggled with it, but I did my best, and I fought with my anxiety, and I felt like I did pretty well at it. And then I got my grade for the class, and it was a D. And the professor said the reason was because I was doing well in basically every aspect of the class um, except that I was apparently stinking it up in the conversation element. Um, and then there came a test that was again a major part of the grade. And for the first part of the test, the professor spoke out loud in Spanish, and we had to translate what she said into English. And this is more of an ADHD thing than an autism thing, but somehow I completely spaced out the entire time she was speaking and didn't hear a word of it. So I flunked that test, and then, the long story short, it was too late to withdraw from the class, and I didn't feel like I could get my grade back in order, so I pretty much just gave up and stopped going. And that was the only F I ever got. And that was why I didn't continue to learn any more Spanish. Um, I mean, the word por favor could mean giant space ninjas for all I know. But, you know, here's the thing. After I got that D, I could have said to the professor, hey, I have autism and this is really challenging for me, but I'm trying. And could we maybe discuss this grade or ways I can do better in the future? But I didn't do that. I never told her or any of my other professors about autism. I could have gone to CSU's Resources for Disabled Students, as I believe it was called at the time, and I didn't do that either. I spent 5.5 years getting my degree, and I never once sought any kind of help. And why not? I mean, I could have made it a lot easier on myself, but I think the reason was um, I didn't really want to have autism, and I was actually kind of ashamed of it. I didn't want other people to know, and I just wanted to be thought of as normal, and I wanted to prove that I could do things without asking for assistance, because that felt like I was sort of just giving in to my autism. And I just want to say, don't make that mistake. I mean, it can be normal to sometimes think, wow, autism kind of sucks. Why couldn't I have just been born with a neurotypical brain instead? But those kinds of thoughts do literally nothing. They're not helpful, and they just get in the way, because you can't change the fact that you weren't born with a neurotypical brain. Things like medication or therapy can help with some of the challenges of living with autism, but nothing is going to rewire your brain for you. And so you have to embrace the fact you have autism and learn to live with that, and work with that rather than against it. So, how can you learn to embrace it? And I think it's easy to focus on the negatives when you're struggling. So what you need to do is try to think of something that's positive about being autistic. And I guarantee there is something for pretty much everybody, even if it seems like there's not. Most of the time when I've seen people ask the question, what do you like about having autism? The answer is usually first and foremost special interests. Autistic special interests differ from neurotypical interests in their intensity. Whether that interest is dinosaurs and Star Trek, like my friend Emily, who's speaking after me, or cars and mechanical engineering, like my friend Alex. These things go way beyond just being interests, and are a really integral part of who those people are. And I know they wouldn't want to give up their deep love of those interests for anything. Now, for me, I don't really have any special interests, and that's kind of rare for autistic people, but it is sometimes the case. And nonetheless, I can pretty easily say, come up with one positive thing about being autistic, and that's that if I weren't, I wouldn't have married the person I married. My wife, Jamie, is not here because she had to run back to... She's here. She came in, and I missed her. Okay. Well, if I weren't autistic... sorry, that made me lose my place here. I met her in a dating group for people on the autism spectrum, and if I weren't autistic, I have never been there in that group, and I'd probably be married to some other more boring woman. So autism for me kind of went from being the reason I thought I'd never be with anyone, to becoming the reason I'm with Jamie, and I wouldn't change that for anything. Um, and I also think that as a writer, autism gives me a unique perspective on the world that's helped me to be original and creative in my fiction. Um, so there are positives about being autistic, and um, you know, again, it's really important. Don't be ashamed to ask to be, or afraid to ask for help if you need it. I mean, you wouldn't. Someone in a wheelchair probably wouldn't be ashamed to use the wheelchair ramp. Um, it's kind of like that. You can. Being autistic is difficult, and it's okay to ask for help. Um, and just be kind to yourself, and don't fight who and what you are. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
To say that's all I've got is minimizing what's so great about what you just said. We've had 2 amazing speakers so far, and we have 1 to go. So this person who I think likes dinosaurs and Star Trek, is that true? Come on up. This is Emily Roberts.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emily. I have done a lot of lecturing at Front Range Community College, and so I am used to being a more structured and formal educator than a sociological one, so I did not prepare a conversation on the more meditative aspects of my autism. I am going to teach you all a little bit more about sensory processing disorder, or SPD, but I will be using my physical internal experiences to exemplify the information. So what is sensory processing disorder? It is a condition in the brain that makes, as the name implies, processing sensory information difficult. It's not a problem with the sensory organs, the eyes, the nose, the ears, the mouth, etc. themselves. It's the way that the brain interprets the information it receives. It interprets it incorrectly. Say that 5 times fast. SPD can be a standalone condition, but it is extremely common in autism. It's one of the diagnostic traits in the DSM-5. It's the same as all squares are rectangles, but rectangles are not squares. You can have sensory processing disorder and not be autistic, but if you are autistic, you probably have sensory processing disorder. So yes, we all know about the 5 traditional senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. Many people do not know about the other 2. There is proprioception, which is spatial awareness, the ability to tell where you are in space in relation to other things, and tactile awareness, so that you know how much force a thing needs to be handled, so you don't pick up a glass full of liquid and throw it across the room. I don't have any experience with that. What? That's sarcasm. Um, and then there's also a vestibular input, which is balance, coordination, the ability to walk in a straight line without looking like a drunk person, tolerance for different types of movements, side to side, up and down, swinging, spinning, which all occurs in the inner ears, the fluid in your ear canals. Any of these 7 senses can be impacted by SPD. You can be hypersensitive or overly sensitive to stimuli, and or hyposensitive or undersensitive to stimuli. And you can have hypersensitivity in one area and hyposensitivity in another. For example, highly sensitive to sounds, but very undersensitive to light. And you can also be hyper or hyposensitive to different specific stimuli within one stimulus group. And I'll kind of explain more of that when I get into my own examples. But first I want to describe broadly what it's like to be hyper and hyposensitive to stimuli. Hypersensitivity or oversensitivity is like trying to drink from a fire hydrant. You stick your face in front of it and you unscrew the cap and you get blasted in the face with a huge amount of water pressure and it breaks your skull. Hyposensitivity or undersensitivity is like being in a desert trying to get water out of a cactus that is offering you one drip at a time. And it's not coming out fast enough to have any effect, to be at all satiating. So for me, a couple of the areas where I am hypersensitive and hyposensitive, big one is lights and visuals. I am very sensitive to sharp white light, fluorescent lights in grocery stores or in dome theaters, harsh noon sunlight, things like that. They hurt my eyes physically, but they also, it feels like having liquid stress poured into your body and you can feel it rising. And everything goes stiff, everything goes rigid. It's difficult to breathe or think properly. There are people talking outside and it's annoying. It's like filling up a water balloon. It gets bigger and tighter until it eventually bursts. So that's what hypersensitivity to light is like for me. On the flip side, I love colored lights, Christmas lights, decorative color changing bulbs. I need to get as physically close to them as I can to have them fill my entire field of vision. It's like I can't pull them into myself enough to experience them in a way that doesn't just make me feel frantic for more. It's like when you're starving and you eat really fast because you need to get as much of that into you as fast as possible to make this sense of desperation go away. And that's why I and a lot of other autistics still do things that people would look at us and go, that's really weird. Why are you doing that? When I can't get enough of a stimulus visually or tactilely, I put it in my mouth, because the mouth is the most sensitive part of the body, tactile wise, much more so than your hands. And being able to feel it, as well as remember what it looked like, it gets a little closer to feeling that sense of, I just need more. So that's why we often look strange. We get right up close to things, or tactile fabric on our faces and things like that. So people used to call this kind of sensory seeking behavior non-functional. That's how it was labeled in the DSM. But it's very functional. Just because other people don't understand the function doesn't mean that it's not functional. So, how much time do I have? Okay, I'll keep going. So, SPD is not a condition that can be cured. It's an inherent part of the way our brains are made up. It can be mitigated for our own sakes, because living with sensory processing disorder is difficult. Sounds are my biggest problem, and it makes it hard to leave the house. I can't spend more than 10 minutes in a grocery store. I get aggressive and run away, because eventually that liquid stress makes the balloon pop. And that's when you see these problem behaviors, which again are only problems to the people watching, because they don't understand what they're seeing. Which is why traditional calming strategies, do your deep breathing, visualize a happy place, let's take a walk, none of that crap works in this context, because if we have a balloon that's about to burst, we need to let some of that water out. We can't just, it's not enough to turn the faucet off so that the balloon stops filling. We have to let some of the water out, and so we have to redirect the physical energy someplace safer. I have a crash pad that I throw my whole body on over and over and over. I scream into pillows as loud as I can, which honestly is not very loud. I punch soft things and rake my fingers over them, because paradoxically, we need the intensity of our own sensory input to release the pressure of the external sensory input, which is why deep proprioceptive input, deep pressure, weighted blankets, squeezing, etc., all work really well, because they are high intensity positive input. So yeah, basically it sucks to live with, and so using occupational therapy to treat SPD as best we're able is not the same as trying to make us less autistic. It's beneficial for us, not for the people around us, which is what older models of autism therapy were about, was to make you look more normal for everyone else. And so these days, many people dislike the idea of having therapy for autism because we don't need therapy, there's nothing wrong with us. But they forget that not all therapy is about making us more palatable for other people. These days, most of it is about making our brains more tolerable for us to live with. Okay, so I mentioned occupational therapy. Physical therapy can also be helpful as well, because when you have a poor sense of proprioception, spatial awareness, you often end up with a different comorbid condition called dyspraxia, which in layman's terms means you're clumsy and you trip on air and you drop things and you have no sense of how much pressure to apply to things. And that also makes life very difficult. Occupational therapy is more sensory and fine motor, whereas physical is more gross motor. And I work on both because I trip on air a lot. I apparently interact with the world with way more force than I need, which explains why my muscles hurt all the time, because apparently you don't need to punch an iPad screen to make it work. You can just go and it does the thing. It's so cool. So yeah, basically SPD is a long road for everyone involved, and it can get frustrating if the person you're with is always freaking out because things are too bright or too loud, or your perfume reeks, or the food you cook stinks, or the dog's fur is too rough, or the baby's screaming, or whatever. It's difficult to be in the position of managing that. It's when you are a caretaker, their limitations become your limitations. Our limitations become your limitations. And it's okay to be frustrated and tired sometimes. We are frustrated and tired too. So it's really about patience. Be patient with us, and when you don't have any more patience to give us, hand us off to somebody else. Give yourself some patience. Because as caregivers, it's the oxygen mask on a plane thing. If you are not in a position to take care of yourself, then you can't take care of us. So just remember yourself, chill out, everything's going to be fine. Thank you.
When I think of the Autism Resource Fair, this is exactly the autism resource situation I'm looking at, because these guys are amazing. I hope you have a chance to talk to them, ask them about what they do and their books. Emily's also working on a comic, which I hope to get published in the next year or so, and is also on a podcast called Emily, which will be coming out in the fall of next year. So many really cool things here. I thank you, the three of you, for being here and for really giving us an education on what we need to know to be better supports for you. And next up, we're going to have the Disability Film Festival from the Arc of Larimer County. They're going to be presenting some of their wonderful films. And later today, we have more folks in here. You can look at a calendar or a schedule, and I think it'll tell you everything you need to know. But one more time, I think a nice warm round of applause for our folks who got up here and taught us something today. All right, thank you so much.